Dhammasukha Meditation Center, Bhante Vimalaramsi, November the 28th, 2008. The Sutta tonight, Majjhima Nikaya number 109, the Greater Discourse on the Full Moon Night, the Mahāpuṇṇama Sutta.
Thus have I heard on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in the eastern part, in the palace of Nagara's mother. Now on that occasion, on the Vipassana day of the 15th, on the full moon night, the Blessed One was seated in the open surrounded by a sangha of monks. Then a certain monk rose from his seat, arranged his upper robe on one shoulder, and extending his arms and hands in reverence, a reverential salutation towards the Blessed One, said to him, "Venerable Sir, I would ask the Blessed One about a certain point, if the Blessed One would grant me to answer an answer to my question." "Sit on your seat, monk, and ask what you like." So the monk sat on his own seat and said to the Blessed One, "Are these not, Venerable Sir, the 5 aggregates affected by clinging, that is, the material form aggregate affected by clinging, the feeling aggregate affected by clinging, the perception aggregate affected by clinging, the formations aggregate affected by clinging, and the consciousness aggregate affected by clinging? These, monks, are the 5 aggregates affected by clinging, that is, the material form aggregate affected by clinging, the feeling aggregate affected by clinging, the perception aggregate affected by clinging, the formations aggregate affected by clinging, and the consciousness aggregate affected by clinging." Saying, "Good Venerable Sir," the monk delighted and rejoiced in the Blessed One's words. Then he asked him a further question. "But Venerable Sir, in what are these 5 aggregates affected by clinging rooted?"
Craving.
These 5 aggregates affected by clinging are rooted in desire. Now this is a marginal, this is what I need the Pali of the Majjhima Nikaya for. Tanha, craving, which is the origin of suffering, comprised by the 5 aggregates. See, that's what, he took a liberty of saying desire instead of craving.
And which that would have been, he says chanda, because in his other translation, he said chanda.
I know, but that's
off. Well,
that's off.
It's a variable, isn't it?
No, that's off. "Venerable Sir, is that clinging the same as these 5 aggregates affected by clinging, or is clinging something apart from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging?" "Monk, that clinging is neither the same as the 5 aggregates affected by clinging, nor is it clinging is the clinging something apart from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. It is the craving and lust in regard to the 5 aggregates affected by clinging that is the clinging there." Get it? Want it again? That clinging is neither the same as these five aggregates affected by clinging, nor is the clinging something apart from the five aggregates affected by clinging. It is the, he says, desire, I say craving, and lust in regard to the five aggregates affected by clinging that is the clinging there. Okay? But Venerable Sir, can there be diversity in the craving and lust regarding the five aggregates affected by clinging? Can there be change in it? There can be, monk. The Blessed One said, "Here, monk, someone thinks thus. May my material form be thus in the future. May my feeling be thus in the future. May my perception be thus in the future. May my formations be thus in the future. May my consciousness be thus in the future." Thus there is diversity in the desire or craving and lust regarding these five aggregates affected by clinging. But Venerable Sir, in what way does the term aggregates apply to the aggregates? What is an aggregate?
Collection.
So it's a collection of material forms. It's a collection of feeling. It's a collection of perceptions and formations and consciousnesses. Right? Monk, any kind of material form whatever, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is the material form aggregate. Any kind of feeling whatever, past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior, superior, near or far. This is the feeling aggregate. Any kind of perception whatever, past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near. This is the perception aggregate. Any kind of formations whatever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, near or far. This is the formations aggregate. Any kind of consciousness whatever, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, near or far. This is the consciousness aggregate. In this way, monk, that term aggregate applies to the aggregates. So basically he's saying any kind of aggregate it is that one of those five classes.
Is it called?
Damper. What is the cause and condition, Venerable Sir, for the manifestation of material form aggregate? What is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the feeling aggregate, the perception aggregate, the formations aggregate, the consciousness aggregate? The four great elements, monk, are the cause and condition for the manifest of material form aggregate. Okay? earth, wind, fire, water. Everything has these aggregates in them, or the opposite. Fire can be cold, but it's still part of the fire element. Everything is made up of these four aggregates in different degrees. So a rock looks harder than the rug, but it still has the elements. They're just different degrees of the elements. Contact is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the feeling aggregate. There's no contact, there is no feeling. Contact is the cause and the condition for the manifestation of the perception aggregate. Why?
Because you must have some type of contact with whatever it is you're perceiving.
Right. What is perception?
The naming of what you see. The process of the naming of what you see. So in order to see it, the contact has to occur. Therefore, it's
in other words, it's the first R.
Recognize.
Contact is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the formation aggregate. Okay? Mentality, materiality is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the consciousness aggregate. And this is where a lot of people that are practicing one-pointed concentration, they forget. They just go to the mentality and they don't have their body anymore.
And mentality and materiality is a commitment with consciousness.
That's right.
Therefore, if you're practicing
one-pointed
teaching and you're trying to do one thing like this, it can't possibly be the same thing.
There you go.
It can't possibly be.
There you go. And I've only been saying this for how long?
So
10 years in this country.
So if they're separating it, you never quite said it that way before. So if they're separating mentality and materiality, and their operational practice is operating on mentality, there is no possible way that they can experience what Sariputta described, or what's described in the other,
or what the Buddha described.
Or what the Buddha described within these different jhanas, if they cannot really describe it because they cannot experience it if they're in absorption.
Right.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
He's glowing.
Venerable Sir, how does identity view come to be? Here, monk, an untaught, ordinary person who has no regard for noble ones, and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, who has no regard for true men, and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, regards material form as self, or self as possessed of material form, or material form as in self, or self as in material form. He regards feeling as self. Or self as possessed of feeling. That's the one. You think yourself, that every time a feeling arises, you think that's yours. Or feeling as in self, or self as in feeling. He regards perception as self, formations as self, or consciousness as self, or self as possessed of consciousness. or consciousness as in self, or self as in consciousness. That is how the identity view comes to be. But Venerable Sir, how does identity view not come to be?
The whole 6 hours.
Ah, thank you.
6 hours. Whole body change.
Here, monk, a well-taught disciple, a noble disciple who has regard for noble ones and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, who has regard for true men and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, does not regard material form as self or self as possessed of material form, or material form as in self or self as in material form. Now that's a lot of words, but what does it actually mean? If you're seeing things through dependent origination and you see the feeling arise and right then you start relaxing, none of this other stuff comes up. You have this clear mind that's bright, that's alert, and extremely clear. There's no tension and tightness in your mind or in your body. And then you see material form for what it really is. What is material form? It's the aggregates that are just mashed together in one way or another. And these are the kind of things that you want to carry with you with your daily activities. Not getting caught in the conceptual thinking about. Seeing it the way it actually is, without craving. Now, if you do that, you're never going to get caught or attacked by fear, anxiety, worry, depression, sadness, whatever the catch of the day happens to be. Now, that's what you're working for. That's what you're working for all of the time. Realizing that when these things start to come up, you sharpen your awareness so that you can see. There's contact, there's feeling, whoops, let's relax. Because if you don't relax, you start getting into your conceptual thinking. Any time you get into your thinking in terms of concepts. And you're identifying with those thoughts and those feelings personally. And that's just a continuation on of the suffering. The whole point of doing a retreat is to calm your mind down enough so you can start seeing it a little bit more closely. But when you get off retreat, it isn't the holiday and just forget all of this stuff and wait till the next retreat. It's take it with you. That's how your practice grows. That your understanding starts to grow in leaps and bounds when you start actually seeing the way things are. Instead of allowing that old habitual tendency to come up and say, I always act this way. You know, it's time for me to be depressed. It's time for me to get caught up in doubt. It's time for me to get caught up in fear. Because whenever this feeling comes, that's how I always act. And that directly leads to sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. And that hurts. You hurt yourself. Why? Because you're identifying with all of these feelings and thoughts, you're taking them personally, and your mindfulness is not sharp enough to catch it. One of the reasons that I keep on impressing on people to develop a sense of humor about themselves is because that gives you the perspective. When you start laughing at how crazy your mind is for taking this stuff on, it's not yours anymore. It's not yours at all. And start sharpening up your awareness. Then you start seeing it as it actually is. Oh, it's just this hindrance.
I'm just on the floor in the trailer.
But it's just this hindrance. That's all it is. The hindrances are your teacher. The hindrances are your best friends. The hindrances are showing where your mind grabs on. Your sense of humor is the thing that lets go of that tension and tightness. So you can see it as an impersonal process. You're not seeing it as a personal, this is me and I have to sit down and think it through and think it out. You just have to be able to be aware of what your mind is doing in the present moment. Yeah.
Doesn't one need to tend to one's own well-being and best interest?
You will naturally. But let's take worry, for example. How much does worry help you attend to your own business? Takes you out of the present moment, makes your mind tense and tight, makes lots more thoughts arise, and you lose huge expanses of time. Every time this feeling comes up, you're going to go back into your worry. And you can say, well, all I have to do is solve what I'm worrying about. But the only way you really solve it so it won't come back is by learning how the process works and 6R'ing it.
Can you think of an example of a time where using this wouldn't be in your best interest?
Oh, can I?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I suppose if somebody walked up and took a swing at me, and if I didn't have some sort of emotional response that got the adrenaline going, I might get my head knocked off.
You'd see him coming.
Or you might just stop. If you start
You'd see him coming and get out of the way. There is no worry, there is no fear, there is no anxiety, there is proper action that's wholesome, not allowing this to take place. Now, there are some times when you have to stand in front of somebody to get in their way so they won't do something that's really nasty. But you have to do it with a balanced mind. You have to do it with a clear mind.
Okay. What if I was not worrying about getting enough wood laid up for the winter?
Well, what good does worry do to you? Thinking about it? Consumed by it? Or do you just go out and take care of it? Why worry about it? Just, this is a job that has to be done. Do it.
Would you say that your worry is a reaction and that doing it would be a response
Yeah, of
to
course.
the situation that came up? So worry, the reaction is always detrimental to your health, and causes tension and tightness in the body, leading to stress, leading to physical and mental problems. But when you're letting go and your mind is open, something happens, you can see what needs to be done, and you take the action, but it's a response to what's needed to be done. What's your story about the two people with response and reaction, the difference between them? What is it, the fire and
Now there is some talk about fear and dread of wrongdoing. But it's not all-consuming. It's just recognizing that if you break this rule, if you do this wrong, if you break one of the precepts, you're going to suffer for it. And you don't want to suffer, so you back away from not doing it anymore. Now, that is just part of more and more awareness of what you're going to do before you do it. And that leads to a more uplifted, wholesome mind. And that leads to your being more alert in the present moment. I had a friend. Her husband was going to have to go in for a operation. She's renowned for worry. She found out a week before he had to go into the operation, and she worried herself sick, literally. And every day she'd call me up and tell me about her worries and how afraid she was, and he might die, and she was going into all kinds of nonsense stuff. Finally, I got fed up with it. I said, I don't want to hear this anymore. All you're doing is spinning your wheels. How does it make you feel to get so involved in your worry? Does that make you feel happy? Are you able to help your husband while you're so caught up in yourself and your thoughts and your fears and your anxieties? And basically what it comes down to is people get caught up in their fears and doubts and worries and these kind of things because they feel a little bit on the helpless side. They don't know what to do. So I'll always fall back on the way that I've always acted my whole life. A stressful situation comes up, I'm going to get into my fear and worry and anxiety and whatever. There's no clarity in there. And you cloud yourself. Drinking your water. You cloud yourself. And you stop yourself from being uplifted and wholesome and helpful because of that old tape of running through. I was at a restaurant. I worked at a restaurant when I was in Maui. Great job. Somebody took an ashtray and dumped it in with all the paper napkins and all of that kind of stuff, and one of the cigarettes was going. And it smoldered for a little while, and I'm across the room taking care of business, and all of a sudden I start hearing people start yelling, "Fire! Fire! Fire! Fire!" And I looked and I went, oh yeah, I see a lot of smoke coming out of this trash can. So I very calmly walked over and got a pitcher of water and put the fire out. Now all these people that were standing around it were yelling, and they didn't respond to what needed to be done. course, I took the trash can, put it outside, turned it upside down, really wet the whole thing down. No problem. They spent their whole rest of the shift talking about how afraid they were. What a waste of time. I mean, okay, there's a problem. Let's go solve the problem. No problem anymore. Go back to work. But look at what they were doing. The mental energy that they burned up because of that situation and how poorly they handled it. And they were extremely glad that I was there to not be caught up in the emotion of the moment. The whole point of Buddhism is learning how to change your old habits and develop new good habits. Change your old habitual thinking of every time this kind of feeling comes up, there's a poor me involved in there. And then depression, and then sadness, and then all kinds of confused thinking. Hopelessness. But there's all kinds of confused thinking. Why is this happening? Because there was a similar situation that happened when I was a kid, and I acted that way. Now, instead of changing the way that you perceive things, changing the way you use your awareness about things, it's easier just to fall back in this old habit. And cause yourself sometimes days, sometimes weeks of suffering. And you go back into that situation and you start looking how your thoughts keep repeating themselves. Same words, same phrasing, same emphasis. Just like it's on a tape deck. Anytime you have repeat thoughts, there is attachment, and you're afraid to change and let it go. Buddhism is about seeing these kind of attachments. Now, why we're afraid of letting these old ways of thinking and being go is beyond me. And I still have mind. I'm not saying that I'm perfect. And I keep on looking at myself going, why am I doing this to myself? I'm only causing myself pain and upset. And I keep going over the same thing with the same words. There's nothing new there. It's boring as hell. Excuse my French. But the whole point is seeing how the process works. And seeing how those old reactions color the way you see the world right now. The whole point of Buddhism is putting on clear lenses, so there is no more color. And when you do that, the fear that arises from change is really scary. And you'll walk right up to that change and then you'll back away. And then you walk right up to that change and you back away until you get used to doing that. And then one of these days you walk right up to that change and you put your toes just over that line. And you go, well, what was I so concerned about? What was I so worried about? Why was I doing that to myself? It's because of the attachment, the want for things to be in a particular way, and being comfortable with that. Another example is women that are battered. Their husband beats them up. and they continue staying with that person that's causing them all this pain. Why? Because they're comfortable with it. They might not like it while it's happening, but they won't change. They're comfortable not changing. And it's real hard to talk some people into, wake up, look at what you're doing to yourself. Don't do that anymore. You don't need to be around this person. Let him go. It's hard to convince because of that attachment. Anyway. What, Venerable Sir, is the gratification? What is the danger? And what is the escape in the case of material form? What is the gratification? What is the danger? And what is the escape in the case of feeling? What is the gratification? What is the danger? And what is the escape in the case of perception? What is the gratification? What is the danger? What is the escape in the case of formations? What is the gratification? What is the danger? And what is the escape in the case of consciousness? What is it?
The gratification is the enjoyment, the feeling of security. The danger is the craving. The escape is the 6 R's.
The pleasure and joy, monk, that arises in dependence on material form, that is the gratification. In the case of material form is impermanent, suffering, and subject to change. This is the danger in the case of material form. The removal of desire and lust, the abandonment of desire and lust for material form, this is the escape in the case of material form. Now this is kind of commentarial. When it's saying that impermanence and suffering, and in everything, that's the cause, that's the danger. But the danger actually is the craving. The real danger is the craving. The I want mind that says, this is good, this is pleasurable, I like this. Or the I don't want mind. That's the real danger. Of course, it's everything is in material form is impermanent. And everything that's impermanent is a form of suffering, but the real suffering comes from the craving.
Was he taking the word suffering and craving interchangeably in this thing?
No.
What he was doing it?
No.
No?
This is commentarial, I'm telling you.
Mm-hmm.
The removal of desire and lust, the abandonment of desire and lust for material forms. Craving. Is the escape in the case of material forms. Doesn't mean material form is good, bad, or indifferent. It's the attachment to it. It's the taking pleasure in it or not pleasure. The pleasure, the joy that arises in dependence on feeling, on perception, on formations and consciousness. This is the gratification in the case of consciousness. Consciousness is impermanent and suffering, subject to change. The attachment is the danger. This is the danger in case of all of these. The removal of desire and lust, the abandonment of desire and lust for consciousness, or all of the other aggregates. This is the escape. So the removal of desire and lust is the removal of craving. Venerable Sir, how does not one know? How does one see? So that in regard to this body with its consciousness and all external signs, there is no I-making, mind-making, underlying tendency to conceit. Monks, any kind of material form whatever, whether past or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, near or far, one sees all material form as it actually is with proper wisdom. What does that mean?
One sees all material form with the observation of the original.
Right. See how it makes sense? But if you didn't have that definition, how it just, wisdom is, what does that mean? I went to a Christian church one time. I was taking a lot of the old people at the nursing home. They wanted to go to this church because they liked this guy because he sang a lot. And he got up and he had a 15 or 20 minute discourse on the importance of developing your wisdom. And he kept on talking about wisdom, and I kept on going, okay, you got me convinced. I got to develop this wisdom. I really need to develop it. And then he just stopped. And it was like, tell me how. Come on. You're not giving me enough here. We got to have more. I just told you how. It's kind of like Yandasina when he was giving his talk, he was talking about developing your understanding and your perception of things. And he never told you what it was. So when I got up on the talk, I did. Troublemaker. Okay, so it's one sees all material form as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Any kind of feeling, whatever, any kind of perception, whatever, any kind of formations, whatever, any kind of consciousness, whatever. One sees all of these as they actually are with proper wisdom. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. It is when one knows and sees thus in regard to this body with its consciousness and all external signs, there is no I-making, mind-making, or underlying tendency to conceit. Then, in the mind of a certain monk, this thought arose. So it seems material form is not self, feeling is not self, perception is not self, formations are not self, consciousness is not self. What self then will actions done by the not self affect?
It makes Say it one more time. What then? What then?
What self then will actions done by the not self affect?
If you have not self, you don't have self.
Well, then the Blessed One, knowing in his mind and the thought in the mind of the monks, addressed the monks thus. It is possible, monks, that some misguided man here, obtuse and ignorant, with his mind dominated by craving, might think that he can outstrip the teacher's dispensations thus. So it seems material form is not self, and he goes through the whole thing. What self then will actions done by the not self affect? Now, monks, you have been trained by me through interrogation on various occasions in regard to various things. Monks, what do you think? Is material form permanent or impermanent?
Impermanent, Venerable Sir.
What is impermanent, suffering or happiness?
Suffering, Venerable Sir.
Is what is permanent, suffering, and subject to change fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is not, this is myself?
No, Venerable Sir.
Okay. Monks, what do you think? Is feeling, perception, formations, consciousness permanent or impermanent?
Impermanent, Venerable Sir.
Is what is impermanent, suffering or happiness?
Suffering, Venerable Sir.
Is what is impermanent, suffering, and subject to change fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself?
No, Venerable Sir.
Therefore, monks, any kind of material form whatever, whether past, future, or present, all material form should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Any kind of feeling, whatever, any kind of perception, whatever, any kind of formations, whatever, any kind of consciousness, whatever, should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Seeing thus, the well-taught noble disciple becomes disenchanted with material forms, disenchanted with feeling, disenchanted with perception, disenchanted with formations, disenchanted with consciousness. Being disenchanted, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge it is liberated. He understands birth is destroyed. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. That is what the Blessed One said. The monks were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. Now, while this discourse was being spoken, through not clinging, the minds of 60 monks were liberated from the taints. So, there you go.
Was that last question sort of like a trick question for the Buddha? I mean, why would he say that?
That's what an awful lot of people think. Especially psychologists, they'll think, well, you have to build up yourself to be able to let go of yourself.
Or they'll say, I understand there is no self, but then they'll continue to emotionally be upset. So who is it that is being emotionally upset? This
Well,
no
and
self
then
is
there's
constantly
the
upset. This is self?
the whole nonsense about higher self and lower self and
Yeah, I know that.
yeah.
They did that in
Mm-hmm.
The monk thought he was going to trick the Buddha.
Yeah, that's why he was called a misguided man. He didn't understand, and this is when you start talking about self, it gets so confusing. And when you talk about taking something personal or impersonal, it clears it up. When you see all of the 5 aggregates as being an impersonal process, there's no question about a self or a higher self or a lower self or a not self watching the self. There's no question of that.
That first phrase about the material form, self-immaterial form, self-immaterial, not those 4 pieces. That was in that first sutta in the Nikaya.
I know.
In that one that they said had everything. That was the art.
I got another book for you.
For there. Huh?
You done reading with it?
Not
One I
quite.
gave
I'm
you?
not quite finished this one. And I really wanted. Well, all right.
I'm determined my book will be in the mail tomorrow.
I hope you're right. So, got any questions? The 5 aggregates are just another way of looking at dependent origination.
There is no self.
There is no self. Everything is part of an impersonal process,
Then,
and it is dependently arising.
if there is no self, how can there be rebirth? What is reborn?
You're being reborn all the time. One set of dependent origination arises and fades away, another one arises. There is a continual birth, death that happens.
Think of your cells in your skin. Your skin is constantly dying, but it's also constantly growing and being reborn. It's the same concept.
I'm talking about...
There's a rising and passing away of phenomena. That's what's happening. That's what is reborn. There is a life continuum that happens that has karma involved with it, depending on the actions of what you've done, where you'll be reborn. But you can be reborn here in hell if you want.
But one is reborn. After one dies, one is reborn
Continually.
as a baby again through the whole cycle. If
There
no
is a
self,
life continue. There is no self.
Is there
There is-
spirit?
No.
Is there...
The answer is no.
Did you give them energy?
There's a being moving from life to life.
The book says there is a being.
There's no being that's moving life to life. There's only energy. And energy, remember we did that energy is movement, right?
Movement, vibration.
Movement and vibration.
Okay.
Yeah. And vibration can only occur with tension, right? You have to have tension in order for vibration to occur. Isn't that true? True.
Well,
I mean, just look
I
at
never
it.
took physics.
But just look at it. It's reasonable to look at the air.
If you're talking about vibration of a rubber banding between it or
Any
a guitar
kind of
string,
vibration,
electromagnetic raise or vibration. I don't know if there's tension in that. I don't know.
Is there a tightness in a wave before it can have a vibration?
So tightness in a wave before. Without vibration, there is not a wave, I think.
Can you have movement without tension?
I don't see the relevance of your...
Because where you're going with your whole entire practice is to find out what it's like with no tension and no tightness, no movement. Nibbana is the ceasing of the movement, the ceasing of the tension and tightness.
But I've never heard the book refer to energy being what is experiencing rebirth or having a rebirth.
That's the life continuum.
A life continuum.
There is a life continuum.
I like that.
But it's not like your life, it's continuing. It's not a you or a spirit.
There is
or
the force of the karmic actions, past actions, that cause the life continuum to continue. Along with craving and clinging and all that other stuff.
Do the discourses address the life continuum?
Sure, why not?